Hi, it's Kevin. Welcome to Relationship Ready. Appreciate you coming here. Please subscribe, like, and support the Relationship Ready family. Today, we're going to talk about pleasure, specifically the pleasure we get in our brains, because life is so much better when it feels good. We're going to talk about dopamine, what it is. We're going to talk about the pleasure we get from it and how to sustain it. And we're going to talk about the art and science of relationships, the art and science of pleasure. Because we all need more pleasure, don't you think so? Although we can overdose on it. And that is the challenge of how to create a balance of pleasure. How to stimulate our brains, stimulate our bodies, stimulate our minds, stimulate our souls well enough to be able to live a relatively happy life and have relatively happy relationships. So, what is dopamine? Well, dopamine is just one of the chemicals. We are all made up of chemicals. We're all the little atoms, but we have at least 3 pleasure chemicals. Those are dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. And the dopamine provides a burst of pleasure to our brain. It's the love that we feel. It's the lust that we feel. It's the pump from that first dose of drugs or that first buzz that you get from alcohol. The sustaining of it is where we run into issues. Because addiction is about chasing that dragon and chasing that initial buzz, chasing that initial dopamine, chasing that pleasure. We do the same thing in relationships. We fall in love in that first stage. We fall in lust in that first stage. And then we keep chasing it instead of allowing our bodies, our brains, to realize we're maturing and let our relationships mature as well. Because mature relationships sound boring, but they're adorable and they're sweet and they're what we need. Past that initial stage. Does that mean we don't get more dopamine? No, we absolutely need more dopamine. But that's how we spice up our relationships. So if too much dopamine is addiction, what's not enough dopamine? Well, that's depression. That's what we need. That's why we have SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, to be able to sustain. Because sometimes we're born without the chemicals for enough pleasure. Naturally. Does that mean we need to provide chemicals unnaturally? No. We can get those naturally from filling up ourselves and filling up our relationships with meaningful pleasure that kicks off our brain chemistry and changes our brain chemistry so that we don't seek out just the pleasure, but we seek out the pleasure and the peace. The pleasure and the peace. Because our best relationships have both. Our best relationships we can have a great time with and we can relax and enjoy. Every dating profile has, I love adventure and high adrenaline, which kicks off that dopamine, that serotonin, that norepinephrine. And I like to sit in my jammies at home and cuddle. That's the peace. We get pleasure from both and a balance of both. So, how do we do this? Well, first, we have to come back to ourselves again. It's self-awareness. We have to figure out how much dopamine, how much pleasure does our body provide for us? Generationally, are we someone who's set up for addiction? Are we someone who's set up for depression? Are we someone who's set up to not have the balance that we need of our pleasure chemicals? And if we are, we need to maintain a lifestyle that stimulates those chemicals on a natural way. And if our lifestyle can't maintain that, our relationships can't maintain that, it is not your partner's responsibility to make you feel good, to give you pleasure. Temporarily, as a short-term thing, absolutely, it is each of our responsibilities to give and receive pleasure from our partners. But it's our responsibility to be able to figure out how much we need. And that's based on our biology, our past generations. And do we get the same pleasure that our peers get? That the percentages of people, our age, our height, our gender, our chemical base, do we fit in enough to get the similar pleasure? Do we need more than other people? You know that one person who always has to take it to the next level. They probably need a little more pleasure. So they need to live a lifestyle that has more pleasure. And if the lifestyle doesn't work, that's the point where it's really helpful to have prescription at the dosages appropriate chemicals, drugs, supplements, because supplements are a healthy way to supplement or bring up those chemicals. But if those don't work well enough, we need to change our brain chemistry, change our lifestyle, change our coping skills, and maybe use prescribed chemicals to evaluate and get help to figure out from a doctor, from a therapist, what you need to maintain your pleasure. And once you figure out how to maintain your own pleasure, there's the fun part. Then you can take on the choice, and with the consent of your partner, to figure out what they need for pleasure. What is their baseline? What gets them excited? What gets them off? What gets their lifestyle to a way that they are more pleasurably around? Because they are kicking off that dopamine in their own brain and then sharing those experiences with you. Because that's the shared moments of relationships and of pleasure. But if you go too far one way, you go into addiction, gambling, drugs, alcohol, shopping, or working out, because it doesn't address all the needs. It addresses some of them. But if you go the other way, you shut down, depressed, don't get out of bed, can't help out your partner, can't do the dishes, they're on you for that, then that's where you need to create a balance. First in yourself, then with your partner, and then in relationship. Because if we have balance in relationship, we have dopamine kicking off, and kicking off again, and kicking off again, and maintaining peace in between. Not kicking off and dropping down. Because that's a roller coaster of a cycle that many relationships are in. Just seeking that dopamine or seeking to avoid that depression. So, how do you maintain it? Be aware of yourselves. Learn how much dopamine and how much pleasure you need in your life. Share that with your partner. Learn how much they need. And then create a balance in yourself and your relationships so that we can all be more relationship ready. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Please subscribe.